Look, people are mad at the Fed right now, and I get it, because even when the official inflation number cools down, your real life doesn't feel cool. Your insurance is up, your utilities are up, your grocery bill still feels like it has a personal vendetta against you. And here's the part most people are missing. The Fed is trying to bring inflation back to normal. But normal means inflation is still going up. It just means it's going up slower. But the way they do it, it can still make housing more expensive. Not because the Fed controls rent. They don't control rent, but because their moves change the game board. And today I want to show you the cleanest, most reliable game board advantage available to everyday people. Because while the Fed squeezes the consumer, they accidentally reward the owner. Not because it's fair, because it's simply math. And once you see it, you stop arguing with the weather and you start dressing for it. So here's a quick reality check. Inflation is not 9% anymore, and that is awesome. The latest CPI has inflation around the high twos. So no, we're not doing doom and gloom here. But here's the key. Every normal inflation, it's still inflation. 2%, 3%, it doesn't matter. Prices are still going up. If prices rise every year and your income isn't keeping pace, you get quietly drained. And that's the problem. Now I'm going to show you the flip side, because inflation is also a transfer. It transfers purchasing power away from people sitting in cash and toward people who are holding assets, especially with assets that have fixed debt attached to them. So the question isn't, is the Fed evil? The question is, are you positioned on the paying side of the equation? Or are you on the collecting side? And here's the whole strategy in one sentence. Fixed debt, floating income. And when you buy a rental property, you lock in a 30-year fixed mortgage. And that payment is frozen in time. And it doesn't care about inflation, and it doesn't care about groceries, and it doesn't care about tariffs. Your mortgage payment wakes up every morning and it says to itself, I'm gonna be the same amount today, and I'm gonna be the same amount in 2035 and in 2055. That is what is called fixed debt. But the rent, here's the good part. If you're an owner, that's floating income. Rent moves over time, and not in a straight line, and not in every market, not every month, but over time, rent adjusts upward, because housing is the one thing people can't cancel. They can cancel Netflix, they can downgrade their phone, they can skip vacation, but they cannot skip shelter. So rent reprices itself with the world. And that spread between the flat, constant mortgage payment and rent that trends upwards over time, that spread is the engine. That's the check. That's the reason landlords look calm while everybody else feels stressed. And now here's the part that's going to surprise you. Most people think high rates should make rents go down because high rates cool the economy. That sounds logical, but housing isn't just economics. It's simple supply and demand. When mortgage rates jump, a bunch of would-be buyers get shoved out of the buyer pool. They can't qualify for a mortgage anymore, or their payment just becomes insane. So what do these potential home buyers do? They either start renting, or they rent longer, or they renew leases. They become tenants instead of home buyers, which means more renters are chasing the same supply. And that can actually push rents up. And there's a ton of research on this. A small rise in mortgage rates can translate into higher real rents within the next couple of years, especially in single family rentals, because those rentals are basically the house you wanted to buy. So the Fed hikes rates to fight inflation, and the housing channel can still inflate. That's the trap. That's the paradox. And if you're the owner, that paradox will pay you. And now before somebody jumps in with, yeah, but rents are cooling, you're right. Rent inflation has cooled from crazy. It's gone from stupid crazy to just crazy. Cooling doesn't mean falling. Cooling doesn't mean going down. It just means rising slower compared to when rates were rising at an insane rate. And there's another weird detail most people don't know. The rent inflation you see in government data is often lagging behind what's happening in the real market because leases renew over time. So even when market rents shift, the official shelter inflation number can take a long time to catch up. And so here's the translation. Housing is slow moving. It's like a cruise ship. It's not a jet ski. The slow moving is exactly what you want when you're trying to build something stable. Now let me make this painfully real with a 10-year example. Let's say you borrow 100 grand on a 30-year mortgage. Call it 7%. Your principal and interest payment is about $665 a month. And that number is frozen for the next 30 years. Now let's assume inflation averages just 3% a year. Not crazy inflation, not panic inflation, just regular 3% inflation. In 10 years, that same $665 mortgage payment has the buying power of roughly $495 in today's dollars. It's the same payment, it's cheaper money. That's what inflation does. It erodes buying power, and it shrinks debt in real terms. Now let's look at the other side. Say the rent today is $1,600 and rent grows at a conservative 2.5% a year. Now in 10 years, that rent is around $2,050 a month. So what happened? The payment effectively got cheaper, your rent moved higher, and that gap is where the automatic raise lives. It's called the cash flow gap. That's where the cash flow gap starts. And that's the boring beauty no one sees. And here's the key point. The strategy does not require runaway, crazy inflation. Even if the Fed beats back the rate at which inflation is rising, even if inflation goes to 2%, over 30 years, the purchasing power of a fixed payment gets chopped down. That's just compounding. So this isn't a bet on chaos. It's a bet on time. It's a bet on the fact that money slowly loses value and housing doesn't go away, and that rents over time go up. Now let's talk about the part nobody says out loud. This system, it hurts people. If you're renting, you're the one getting repriced. If you're on fixed income, inflation is a silent grinder. So if you're not cheering for higher rates, I'm telling you the truth about the board we're playing on. Because if you don't like the rules, your best move is to stop being exposed to them. You don't protest inflation by staying in cash. You protest by owning things that reprice. That's the move. Now I can already hear the comments. I can already hear the pushback. Okay, Jimmy, I get the math, but I don't want another job. I don't want to fly to the Midwest. I don't want to guess which neighborhood. I don't want to deal with the tenants. I don't want to deal with the toilets. That's completely and totally fair. A rental property can be an asset or it can be a major headache, depending on the system around it. And that's why we built what we built. And if you want a free walkthrough of how this works, not a pitch, just the mechanics and the math, the link is below. Now, one more thing, because this matters for credibility. People throw around the Fed is printing like it's always 2020. The reality is more nuanced, but here's what matters for you. The Fed has already shown you they prioritize keeping the system liquid. And when liquidity tightens, they react. They've adjusted balance sheet policies. They've made more technical purchases to keep reserves ample, and they call it reserve management. And they're going to tell you it's not a stimulus. Cool, whatever, fine. You don't need a label. You just need to understand what it means in real life. They will protect the plumbing. And when the plumbing gets protected, hard assets tend to hold up better than cash. And look, I'm not here to twist your arm. If you want to keep your cash in the bank and hope the headlines calm down, that's completely your call. But if you're even considering getting on the owner side of this, the only real question is this: how do you do it without turning your life into contractor calls and tenant texts? Because that's where most people get stuck. They love the math and they hate the execution. And quite frankly, they don't have the time to do the execution. So I made a quick follow-up that shows what this actually looks like in the real world. One property, real numbers, the exact find, fix, tenant management chain, and what the check looks like after the dust settles. And you'll see exactly how that plays out in this video here. Once you watch it, you'll know immediately whether this is your lane or whether you should ignore all of it and get back to your life.